April 24, 1943. 27,000 feet above Wilhelmshaven, Germany. Captain James Howard tightens his grip on the control column of his P-51B Mustang, eyes scanning the crystalline blue above the North Sea. The plexiglass canopy offers him an unobstructed view, 360 degrees of sky, cloud, and the distant contrails of B-17 flying fortresses laboring toward their target. His oxygen mask hisses with each breath. The temperature outside is 40 below zero. Inside his leather jacket and heated suit, sweat beads on his forehead. He's been airborne for 3 hours. His fuel gauges still read half full. 3 months ago, that would have been impossible. Through his headset, the crackle of radio chatter erupts. Bandits! 11 o'clock high. FW-190s. Howard banks left, the Merlin engine responding with a throaty roar that vibrates through the airframe. The supercharger whines as he pushes the throttle forward. 67 inches of manifold pressure. The Mustang accelerates like it's been kicked by a mule. His airspeed indicator climbs past 400 miles per hour. There are 4 dark specks diving out of the sun. Focke-Wulf 190s, the Luftwaffe's finest. Their radial engines glint as they roll into attack position, targeting a struggling B-17 trailing smoke from its number 3 engine. The bomber's gunners send tracer rounds arcing across the sky, desperate lines of orange that fall short. Howard pulls back on the stick, feels the G-forces press him into his seat. The horizon tilts 90 degrees. He's climbing now, using the altitude advantage, positioning himself above and behind the German fighters. His thumb hovers over the gun button. 6.50 caliber machine guns wait in the wings, 3 per side, each loaded with 400 rounds. The lead FW-190 hasn't seen him yet. The German pilot is fixated on the bomber, already adjusting his angle for a deflection shot that will rake the B-17's cockpit. Howard counts down the distance. 800 yards, 600, 400. At 300 yards, he squeezes the trigger. The Mustang shudders as all 6 guns hammer in unison. A stream of armor-piercing and incendiary round stitches across the FW-190's left wing. Pieces of aluminum skin peel away, glittering in the sunlight. The German fighter snap rolls right, breaking off its attack, trailing a thin ribbon of smoke. But Howard isn't finished. He follows through the turn, the Mustang's laminar flow wing keeping him glued to his opponent's tail. The German pilot tries everything. A split-S, a chandelle, a desperate scissors maneuver that would have shaken off any other Allied fighter at this altitude. But the P-51B matches him move for move, the Merlin engine pulling strong at 27,000 feet where the old Allison-powered Mustangs would have been gasping for air. The other FW-190s scatter, abandoning their attack run. They've learned the hard lesson that dozens of Luftwaffe pilots have learned in recent weeks. The new American fighters can go the distance. Literally. Howard checks his fuel again. Still enough to escort the bombers to the target, shepherd them home, and have reserve for a fight over the English Channel if necessary. He thinks about the old P-47 Thunderbolts he used to fly. Magnificent fighters, but always turning back at the German border, fuel tanks running dry, leaving the bombers to face the wolves alone. Not anymore. He keys his radio. Bandits driven off. Bombers are clear. The B-17 pilot responds, his voice tight with relief. Thanks, Mustang. We owe you. Howard smiles behind his oxygen mask. The bomber crews have started calling them little friends. But there's nothing little about what's happening up here. The P-51B Mustang is changing everything, not just battles, but the entire strategic equation of the air war over Europe. And it almost didn't happen. The story of how a British engineer's shortcut created the war's greatest fighter begins not in the skies over Germany, but in a hangar in Southern California, 3 years earlier, when a desperate British purchasing commission arrived with an impossible request. September 1940, Inglewood, California. The British Air Commission walks into North American Aviation's headquarters with a problem that looks unsolvable. Leading them is James H. Dutch Kindleberger, North American's president, except he's not leading them at all. He's listening. The British are here to buy fighters, lots of them, and they're willing to pay in cash that American industry desperately needs. But they don't want North American to build fighters. They want the company to manufacture Curtiss P-40 Warhawks under license. Kindleberger leans back in his chair, fingers steepled, as Sir Henry Self finishes his pitch. Behind Self, Air Vice Marshal Hugh Dowding's procurement officers shuffle papers filled with technical specifications and production timelines. Outside the window, the California sun beats down on North American's factory floor, where at 6 Texan trainers are being assembled in growing numbers. "Gentlemen," Kindleberger says, his voice carrying the confidence of a man who's about to make a bold counteroffer. "What if we built you something better?" The room goes quiet. Self's expression shifts from polite interest to skepticism. "Mr. Kindleberger, Britain is at war. We don't have time for experimental aircraft. We need proven fighters, and we need them now. Give me 120 days, Kindleberger replies. We'll design a fighter from scratch that outperforms the P-40 in every metric. It's an audacious promise. Most aircraft take years to develop. But Kindleberger has an ace up his sleeve. James H. Dutch Kindleberger, no relation. His chief designer, Edgar Schmud. The Austrian-born engineer has been quietly sketching concepts for a modern fighter, incorporating lessons from German aerodynamics and the latest NACA research on laminar flow wings. The British, desperate and running out of options as the Luftwaffe pounds their cities nightly, agree to the gamble. What happens next is a masterclass in rapid engineering. Schmud and his team work around the clock. They study every fighter design they can get their hands on: the Messerschmitt Bf 109's inverted V-12 engine layout, the Supermarine Spitfire's elliptical wing, the P-40's rugged structure. But they're not copying. They're synthesizing, taking the best ideas and combining them with innovations of their own. The laminar flow wing is the key. Traditional wings create drag through turbulent air flowing over their surface. But by carefully shaping the wing's cross-section, maintaining smooth airflow for 60% of the chord length, Schmud's design promises dramatically reduce drag and increase speed. This cutting-edge aerodynamics, barely proven in wind tunnels, never tested in combat. They mount the engine low in the fuselage, behind the pilot, creating a sleek, predatory profile. The radiator goes underneath in a revolutionary scoop that actually uses the heated air as a form of jet propulsion, the Meredith effect, converting waste heat into forward thrust. The cockpit sits high, offering exceptional visibility. The tail is tall and commanding. On October 26, 1940, exactly 117 days after the British placed their order, the NA-73X rolls out of the hangar. She's beautiful. Vance Breeze, North American's test pilot, takes her up on her maiden flight. The aircraft handles like a dream, responsive and stable. But there's a problem, and it becomes apparent the moment they start performance testing. The Allison V1710 engine. It's the only American-built liquid-cooled V12 available in quantity, so the choice was obvious. At sea level and low altitude, the Allison performs admirably. The prototype hits 382 miles per hour at 13,000 feet, faster than the P-40, faster than most fighters in service. The British are impressed enough to order 320 aircraft, giving it the name Mustang, following their practice of naming American-built fighters after Western themes. But as testing continues through 1941, the fatal flaw reveals itself. Above 15,000 feet, the Allison-powered Mustang loses its edge. The engine's single-stage, single-speed supercharger can't maintain power at altitude. By 20,000 feet, where most air combat over Europe occurs, the Mustang's performance degrades dramatically. It's still fast in level flight, that aerodynamic efficiency is real, but it can't climb with the Luftwaffe's high-altitude fighters, can't dogfight effectively in the thin air where bombers need protection. The RAF takes delivery of its first Mustangs in late 1941. They're relegated to low-altitude reconnaissance and ground attack missions, tactical roles where the aircraft excels, but nowhere near the strategic game-changer Britain needs. The bomber offensive into Germany is bleeding. 8th Air Force B-17s and B-24s are being slaughtered by German fighters that strike beyond the range of escort fighters, then fade away before the Spitfires and Thunderbolts can respond. The Mustang, for all its promise, has become an also-ran. A fast reconnaissance plane, a decent ground attack aircraft, but not a war winner. At RAF Duxford, 90 miles north of London, a test pilot named Ronald Harker climbs into Mustang AM-208 on April 30, 1942. Harker is a Rolls-Royce employee, evaluating aircraft for potential engine installations. He's flown everything: Spitfires, Hurricanes, Typhoons. He expects the Mustang to be pleasant but unremarkable. He's about to make a discovery that will change the war. Harker advances the throttle and feels the Allison engine pull him down Duxford's runway. The Mustang lifts off smoothly, gear retracting with hydraulic precision. He climbs to 10,000 feet, runs through basic handling tests. Responsive ailerons. Solid rudder authority. The visibility from this greenhouse canopy is extraordinary. He can see everything. Then he levels off and pushes the throttle to combat power. The Mustang accelerates like nothing he's ever flown. The airspeed indicator whines past 300, past 350. At 380 miles per hour, he's moving faster than a Spitfire Mark V at the same altitude, and he's barely trying. The laminar flow wing is doing exactly what Schmud promised, slicing through the air with minimal drag, turning engine power into pure speed. Harker grins behind his oxygen mask. This airframe is magnificent. But then he climbs higher. At 18,000 feet, he feels the Allison start to wheeze. The manifold pressure drops. The rate of climb diminishes. By 22,000 feet, the Mustang feels ordinary, quick in level flight, but sluggish in maneuvers, unable to sustain energy in combat turns. Harker knows engines. He spent years testing Rolls-Royce's Merlin, the 12-cylinder masterpiece powering Britain's Spitfires and Hurricanes. The Merlin's two-stage, two-speed supercharger maintains power up to 30,000 feet, feeding compressed air to the cylinders even where the atmosphere grows thin. It's the difference between an engine that works at altitude and one that dominates. As he brings the Mustang back to Duxford, an idea crystallizes in his mind. The airframe doesn't need redesigning. It needs re-engineering. Back on the ground, Harker doesn't file a routine report. He writes directly to Rolls-Royce management. The performance of this aircraft is phenomenal. If it were fitted with a Merlin engine, it would be a world beater. The letter reaches Roland Beaumont, Hawker Aircraft's chief test pilot, and Ray Dorey at the Air Ministry. By summer 1942, the idea is gaining traction. But there's resistance. Britain is at war. Resources are stretched impossibly thin. Every Merlin engine is already allocated to Spitfires, Hurricanes, or Lancaster bombers. Diverting engines to repower an American aircraft seems wasteful. Then the calculations arrive. Engineers at Rolls-Royce Hucknall run the numbers. The Mustang's clean airframe, combined with the Merlin 61's high-altitude power, should produce speeds exceeding 440 miles per hour at 25,000 feet. More importantly, it should maintain combat effectiveness above 30,000 feet, higher than current Luftwaffe fighters operate, high enough to escort bombers deep into Germany. The Air Ministry authorizes 5 test conversions. In October 1942, Rolls-Royce engineers at Hucknall receive Mustang AM-208, the same aircraft Harker flew. They remove the Allison V1710, strip out its cooling system and accessories, and begin the delicate work of fitting a Merlin 61. The engines are similar in displacement and layout, but nothing is interchangeable. New engine mounts must be fabricated. The cooling system requires redesign. The propeller needs changing. The Merlin turns opposite the Allison, requiring a different reduction gear. Takes weeks of careful work. On October 13, 1942, the converted Mustang, now designated Mustang X, fires up for the first time. The Merlin's distinctive growl echoes across the airfield, deeper and more aggressive than the Allison's whine. Test pilot Michael Lithgow takes her up on November 13th. Within minutes, he knows they've created something special. At 25,000 feet, the Mustang X accelerates to 433 miles per hour. At 30,000 feet, where the Allison version would be gasping, the Merlin-powered variant still has power to spare, hitting 414 miles per hour. The climb rate is staggering. The range, thanks to the Mustang's efficient design and internal fuel capacity, extends beyond anything in Allied inventory. Lithgow lands and delivers his verdict in technical terms that barely conceal his excitement. This aircraft has the performance to engage any fighter in the Luftwaffe inventory at any altitude and win. News of the conversion reaches Washington in December 1942. The U.S. Army Air Forces, desperate for long-range escort fighters, immediately orders North American to begin production of Merlin-powered variants. But there's a problem. Rolls-Royce can't supply enough Merlins from British factories. The solution comes from Packard Motor Company in Detroit. They're already producing Merlins under license for American aircraft. The Packard V-1650, essentially a Merlin built to American specifications, becomes the heart of what North American designates the P-51B. By spring 1943, the first P-51Bs are rolling off production lines in Inglewood, California, and a new facility in Dallas, Texas. The B model features the Packard Merlin V1650-3, producing 1,400 horsepower with its two-stage supercharger. 4.50 caliber machine guns in the wings, later increased to 6 in most aircraft. Internal fuel capacity of 184 gallons, expandable to 419 gallons with drop tanks. The numbers tell the story. 440 miles per hour at 30,000 feet. Combat radius of 750 miles with drop tanks, enough to reach Berlin and back from English bases. Service ceiling above 41,000 feet. Captain James Howard received his P-51B in February 1943. After years flying P-40s and P-47s, the Mustang felt like stepping into the future. December 1, 1943. 30,000 feet above Solingen, Germany. Major James Howard is alone, and he's about to do something impossible. His squadron scattered 15 minutes ago, chasing German fighters that split and dove in opposite directions. Classic Luftwaffe tactics designed to separate escort fighters from the bombers. Howard looks down and sees the reality of his situation. 30 B-17s from the 401st Bomb Group, struggling through flak and climbing toward them a swarm of German fighters. FW-190s and BF-109s, at least 30 of them, positioning for a mass attack. He's one P-51B against an entire Jagdgeschwader. Howard doesn't hesitate. He pushes the throttle to war emergency power and dives. The Merlin responds instantly, 67 inches of manifold pressure, 3,000 revolutions per minute. The Mustang accelerates past 500 miles per hour in the dive. The airframe rock-solid despite the speed. At 400 yards, he opens fire on a Bf-109 lining up on a bomber's tail. The German fighter breaks left, trailing smoke. Howard doesn't follow. There are too many targets. He pulls up, bleeds off speed, and immediately engages another 109, making a head-on pass at the formation. His 6.50 caliber stitch tracers across the German's engine cowling. The Messerschmitt's propeller flies apart, and the fighter tumbles away. For the next 30 minutes, Howard becomes a one-man air force. He attacks from above, from below, from the sides. Anywhere a German fighter tries to press an attack, he's there. The Mustang's speed lets him dictate every engagement. When he needs altitude, the Merlin pulls him up effortlessly. When he needs speed, the clean airframe gives it to him. When he needs to turn, the Mustang's low-speed handling keeps him in the fight. The Luftwaffe pilots have never seen anything like it. One American fighter, everywhere at once, moving with a speed and agility that seems impossible at this altitude. They land describing a whole squadron of Mustangs that attacked them. In reality, it was just Howard, exploiting every advantage the P-51B gives him. He lands at Boxted with 7 minutes of fuel remaining and ammunition counters reading 0. The armorers count 6 confirmed kills, possibly more. Howard will later receive the Medal of Honor for this mission, the only fighter pilot in the European theater to earn it. But the real story isn't Howard's courage. It's what his aircraft made possible. By early 1944, P-51B and C models, the latter built in Dallas, essentially identical, are flooding into 8th Air Force squadrons across England. The 354th Fighter Group, the first to receive Mustangs, begins flying escort missions that reach deeper into Germany than anyone thought possible. Leipzig, Brunswick, Berlin itself. The strategic equation shifts overnight. Before the Mustang, German fighters could wait beyond escort range, then tear into bomber formations with impunity. Luftwaffe pilots would rack up kills until their ammunition ran dry, then land, rearm, and launch again. American bomber losses sometimes exceeded 10% per mission, an unsustainable rate. Now the little friends go all the way. Every mission, every mile. General Jimmy Doolittle, commanding the 8th Air Force, issues new orders in January 1944. P-51 pilots are no longer to stay glued to the bombers. They're to actively hunt German fighters, pursue them to their airfields, strafe them on the ground if necessary. The mission isn't just to protect bombers, it's to destroy the Luftwaffe entirely. The P-51 makes it possible. Its range means it can chase German fighters back to their bases. Its speed means it can catch anything the Luftwaffe flies. Its high-altitude performance means it dominates the hunting grounds where combat occurs. And its reliability, the Merlin engine proving remarkably robust, means it keeps coming back. Luftwaffe losses skyrocket. Experienced pilots, irreplaceable veterans of years of combat, start dying in numbers that shock German high command. The P-51 doesn't just win individual dogfights, it wins the war of attrition. By D-Day, June 6, 1944, the Luftwaffe is a shadow of its former self. Allied bombers pound German cities and industries with near impunity. When German fighters do appear, they're swarmed by Mustangs that can outfight them at any altitude. The transformation is complete. An aircraft that began as a disappointment, powered by an inadequate engine, has become the weapon that breaks the back of German air power. All because a British test pilot recognized potential, and engineers had the vision to make one critical change. Ronald Harker's shortcut, swapping one engine for another, achieved what years of design evolution might never have accomplished. It created the right aircraft at the right moment with the right capabilities to change history. The numbers tell a story that words struggle to capture. In 1943, before the P-51B enters widespread service, 8th Air Force loses 1,099 heavy bombers over Europe. The loss rate hovers near 10% per mission. Mathematically, every bomber crew has a 1 in 3 chance of completing their required 25 missions. The strategic bombing campaign teeters on the edge of failure. In 1944, with Mustangs escorting every deep penetration raid, bomber losses drop to 3.5% per mission. The Luftwaffe loses over 2,000 fighters in the first 6 months of the year alone. German pilot training programs collapse under the weight of casualties. By autumn, the average Luftwaffe pilot has less than 30 hours of flight time. American pilots arrive in England with over 400. It's not a fair fight anymore. It's a slaughter. The P-51 doesn't just escort bombers, it hunts. Mustang pilots strafe airfields across Germany, destroying aircraft on the ground faster than factories can replace them. They attack trains carrying aviation fuel, refineries producing it, and factories building replacement fighters. The Merlin's reliability means they keep coming back, mission after mission, grinding down German air power through sheer relentless presence. General Carl Spaatz, commanding U.S. strategic air forces in Europe, states it plainly in his post-war report. The long-range escort fighter was the weapon that won the air war over Europe. The P-51 Mustang was that fighter. By May 1945, North American has produced over 15,000 Mustangs. They serve in every theater: Europe, the Pacific, the Mediterranean. In the Pacific, P-51s flying from Iwo Jima escort B-29 superfortresses to Tokyo and back, a 1,500-mile round trip that would have been impossible with any other fighter. But it's over Europe where the Mustang's impact is most profound. The aircraft that almost didn't happen, that existed only because a British purchasing commission took a gamble on an untested company, that found its true potential only after a test pilot's recommendation led to a crucial engine swap. This aircraft broke the Luftwaffe and made D-Day possible. Ronald Harker never flew combat missions. He never shot down an enemy aircraft. But his 5-word assessment, "Fit it with a Merlin," changed the course of the war as surely as any general's strategy or any soldier's sacrifice. Edgar Schmud's brilliant airframe design, sitting in hangars as a disappointed also-ran, found new life. The Rolls-Royce engineers who made the conversion work, the Packard workers who built Merlins by the thousands, the North American production teams who turned out Mustangs at an astonishing rate, They all contributed to creating a weapon that arrived exactly when it was needed most. Sometimes, the difference between defeat and victory isn't a revolutionary new invention. Sometimes it's recognizing that you already have the pieces, they just need to be put together differently. The P-51 Mustang wasn't perfect. Early models suffered from fuel system problems. The bubble canopy introduced on later D models improved visibility but weakened the fuselage structure. Pilots complained about the wing guns jamming at high altitude. But none of that mattered because the Mustang solved the one problem that had seemed unsolvable: how to fight effectively over Germany, 1,000 miles from home. Captain James Howard, who proved what one pilot in one Mustang could accomplish, survived the war. He returned home to Ohio, the Medal of Honor around his neck, and rarely spoke about that December day over Solingen. When asked about the P-51, he kept his answer simple. It was the airplane we needed. It took us all the way, and it brought us home. That's the legacy of an engineer's shortcut. Not just a faster fighter or a more efficient design, but a weapon that gave young men a fighting chance to survive, to complete their missions, and to win a war that hung in the balance. The P-51 Mustang didn't just dominate the skies. It opened them.